Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Derry's Travel Chats for February 25th, 2020. I'm Derek Windsor, your host of the show, and this, I think, is episode 29 for me, so it's been a great run so far. Today, while we're going to talk about travel, we're going to talk about it in a little different way, and we're going to talk to a journalist in the travel industry and just see how they are coping, one with their own industry part of it, and how some of the conversations they're having with industry leaders and the suppliers of all of these wonderful products that we all get to enjoy when we can travel. So I hope you enjoy today's show. I'm sure it will be interesting and eye-opening. And now I'd like to bring on one thing I'd like to say, where I'm using a whole new platform today. So trying to improve my show. And so now I'm going to bring along with me now Michael Pihach. See, I know I do it. See,
you got it. That's perfect.
And so Michael is the managing editor of Pihach Global Media, a travel publication, both online and I'm not sure, Michael, if you have a print publication or not, but I know I receive everything online. So welcome to Derry's Travel Chats, and I know we'll have a great conversation this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Derek, on episode 29. And I really love this new format. It's very, very slick. You've done a really good job. So congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Obviously, there's so much to talk about in the travel industry.
Yeah. And I mean, here in Newfoundland, I mean, we're going through the second wave a little later than some other people. And people right now in Newfoundland are just really sitting on the edge of their seat because, all of a sudden now we have 10 people in hospital, 5 in the ICU, just announced today. When you're dealing with zero numbers, and we have over 400 active cases right now, so people are really sitting back and in that lockdown and saying, I know right now travel is, I want to do it, but it's really the last priority for me right now. It's all about staying safe, and we agree with that as well. So I don't know how things are starting to play out in Ontario for you, but I know it's been very active, and you've been in lockdown since before Christmas. So.
Yeah, and absolutely. It's a very fluid situation, and the numbers that come in every day. I will say, the case counts that they report have gone down over the past few weeks, but it's still alarming. Absolutely. In the same situation, it's we all are frustrated. We all want this to be over with as soon as possible, but we all have to do our part in flattening the curve. And when we go through lockdowns and when we go through all these different restrictions, we really see the impact it has on businesses, on people's mental state. It's a very serious situation when you look at how long this has gone on. But there's also a bit of optimism. I always try to look at the optimism. I always try to be an optimist. And, as much as the vaccine rollout isn't happening as fast as we would like to see it, it is happening. And we will get to that point where more people are vaccinated. And we will get to that point where people feel safer to travel once again, which I'm sure a lot of people in the travel industry would agree with. I'm sure people are looking forward to the day where we can just get back to doing what we love, and that's traveling, and in the case of travel agents, selling travel.
Yeah. So, in as the managing editor, and you have your uh, journalists who are going and talking to people in the industry, and I'm sure talking to also people who clients of who want to travel and so on. What are some of the things that COVID you're seeing with COVID, and how has it impacted even you as a journalist and so on?
Mhm. Well, the whole structure of our operation has changed since over the past year, since COVID-19 was first declared as a global pandemic. I mean, just structurally, all of us, we worked out of an office. We have offices in Quebec and Toronto. Like most people, we started working from home. And that was very interesting, especially in a news environment, because our kitchens and living rooms and bedrooms suddenly turned into these 24-hour news operations as news was breaking, what seemed like every hour at that point. So in terms of how we worked really changed because we were in our homes. And at the time, we didn't know anything about the virus. So going on public transit and seeing people in person for interviews, that all went digitally. And I think, like all workplaces, we're still working remotely as well. So that's just sort of the structural side. In terms of the content, in terms of the type of coverage that we would put out, it has it's changed a lot over the past year. I think the best way to really understand it is, travel trade news writers are the kind of content that we're dealing with has changed just as much as it has changed for travel agents. PaxNews.com is, we always try and pride ourselves as the voice of the travel advisor. We're constantly going out to explore issues, explore questions that travel advisors may have about certain things happening in the industry. We really try and keep our ear close to the ground and bring those issues to light on our website. But just like travel agents, travel writers have had to change the type of stories they write as well. Like if you think about before COVID, the things that we were covering were fam trips, event coverage, product and brochure launches, practical information about passports, announcements about new routes, and also stories that could help travel agents sort of increase the value of their sales. But now it's like our coverage revolves around PCR testing, the difference between a PCR test and an antigen test. Don't ask me the difference. I mean, I know the difference. It's just it's a lot. It's all these new terminologies and terms and buzzwords that we just never used before, that we've really had to learn and get used to over the past 12 months. Writing stories about how disease is spread and disease prevention, hand sanitizer and mask wearing, and how hotels have had to adapt all these new health and safety protocols to not only, restore consumer confidence, but also keep people safe. And then, of course, there's the stories that have to do with border control and entry requirements, the different entry requirements for every destination, quarantining, and all these federal announcements that are happening and continue to happen. I think before COVID, like the few federal stories that we covered might have been the passenger rights bill and the grounding of the Max 8, because the government got involved to facilitate that. But now it's like, as anyone who watches the news on a regular basis, though, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, makes announcements regularly, updates from the Transport Ministry. All these announcements are fundamentally changing the way the travel industry works, and it's changing the way people travel. And our priority at PaxNews.com has just been to get the information out as soon as possible. Our operation really operates now as a breaking news operation. So when news hits, travel agents can get it fast. They can share the information with their clients and just stay on top of all the information that's being thrown at us all the time now. So that's really the big change that we've noticed at PAX. But what I will say is that, here in Canada, there's a lot of travel trade outlets that do what we do. And I have to say that all the travel trade media outlets out there have done such a great job at keeping the trade up to date. Everyone is fiercely passionate about getting those stories out there, but really learning to understand the stories so our readers can too. So for that reason, I think the Canadian travel trade community is in good hands because they've got lots of different media outlets taking care of them and really dissecting this information, which can be really complicated at sometimes, especially when there's tons of announcements kind of being thrown at you.
I mean, back in last March, I mean, now we're within weeks of the one full year of the government closing the borders and so on. Um, I mean, those probably 6 to 8 weeks from March into May, the amount of information, the changes, even from some companies on a daily basis, or even get something out in the morning and all of a sudden in the afternoon, there's another change in the regulation, the policy.
Yeah.
Those organizations like yourself that have helped me as an agent and all the other agents across being able to share that story with their clients to make sure that everybody understands what's going on and the steps that are having to be taken.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep track of, and it still is. I mean, you're right. Like I think back, we're almost going on 1 year of the industry really shutting down and borders closing. And I remember that day when it happened. It was like I didn't leave. I didn't have lunch some days. Like it was just we were glued to our screens watching this all unfold, and also answering questions from the trade as they were coming in. I think like one of the things that I like to pride PAX on is when people write us and ask us if we know anything, we are sometimes in a position to, contact public health and ask those questions and at least figure out. We don't always have the answers, but we're in a position to figure out the answers when people have questions about it. And we're just an extension of those resources that travel agents can use when there's lots to figure out.
So that's fabulous. I mean, what you do has been, as I said, has been phenomenal for me as an agent and having that resource. So, but
Thank you.
in doing that, you still have to stay in tune with what's happening, and even though you're stuck in Toronto or in your home or whatever. So how have you been able to get out and see some destinations while there was there was a bit of a low period in the summer? So have you been able to get out and be able to be one-on-one type of thing with destinations just to see how they are coping and whether or not things are going to hopefully improve?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, we did make a point of getting down to the Caribbean, in fact, to really get an on-the-ground look at how the travel industry was adapting to this new world. In the months of October and November, there were some opportunities to go down to some hotels and see what the situation was. That's changed a little bit now. The mandatory hotel quarantine and some of the new restrictions they've introduced have made travel more difficult than ever, for lack of better words. But there was a small period in the fall going into winter where hotels had really, gotten really comprehensive programs together around health and safety. And up until that point, we at PAX had, we'd received the press releases, we'd written about all sorts of new health and safety programs that hotels had launched, that airlines had launched. And that's all great. And that's all important information. But I really wanted to get that on the ground look at what was actually happening in destinations. So we had an opportunity to go down to the Dominican Republic in the month of November. And it was only meant to be a 3-day trip. And I wanted to travel so much, I was willing to go to the Dominican Republic for 3 days and then quarantine for 14 days when I got back. It sounds mad to some people, but I was really gung-ho on getting down there and seeing it with my own 2 eyes about what was going on. So we went down to Punta Cana, the Punta Cana area. We ended up going to originally it was the reopening of Secret's Royal Beach. Actually, they were doing a big reopening, and just to give you an idea of how important it was for an all-inclusive resort to open, the president of the Dominican Republic showed up to the opening, and it was a huge ceremony. It was a really big deal because, of course, as we all know, it's such a tourism dependent region, and that region was just doing all that they could to kickstart the industry and kickstart the economy, which it so heavily relies on. So we went down. This 3-day trip ended up turning into a 24-day trip. Once I got down there, word was out, the PAX was there, and then suddenly all these other opportunities to go to all kinds of different resorts to not only see health and safety in action, but really see with our own 2 eyes how the resorts were adapting their operations to meet the needs of today's sort of pandemic traveler, but also ultimately keep people safe from contracting the coronavirus. So it was a very educational trip, and we learned a lot. Again, we went to 8 different resorts. And, in a nutshell, everyone is doing what they can. They're all doing their best to really restart the industry. They all have very comprehensive, at least most of them have very comprehensive health and safety programs that have thought of everything. It comes down to having good staff. The resorts that have these staff down there, they've had to relearn everything about hospitality, from masks to how to educate customers about COVID prevention. I really give the staff in these destinations lots of credit for taking the time and initiative to have to relearn their own trade. And really, there weren't a lot of Canadians at these resorts because of the travel restrictions that were in place and that are currently in place. The Americans and the locals are keeping these operations alive down there. And, as much as people are really proud of the various initiatives and health and safety protocols that they've launched, there's still this sense of worry because they have no control over the situation whatsoever. They have no control over what, protocols Canada passes, what the US does, what the UK does. So the fate of their operations is in the hands of other people. And that's very nerve-wracking for a lot of companies that operate, and I'm just speaking about Dominican right now, but I'm sure that other companies in other places can relate to that as well. So it's a little uneasy, but people are obviously grateful to have tourists back. I mean, the plane I went down, I took an American carrier in, and it was full. It was a full plane. It was good to see people traveling again. And all of the resorts have done impeccable work at really upping their cleanliness standards, their sanitization standards. A lot of them have, one thing a lot of the hotels have done down there is moved a lot of programming outside so people don't feel like they're constricted inside. Okay. You know what I mean? And there is something to be said about being outside as a way of, preventing the virus from spreading. What I will say is that a lot of these hotels down there, their capacity is capped. I think when I was there, it was capped at 60%. Was it at 60% when I was there? Absolutely not. I think at one resort, I had an entire tower to myself. So if you want to talk about social distancing, you will find it down there, most likely, when you go to these places, because they aren't full and they aren't allowed to operate at full capacity. So that really gives people an opportunity to spread out and keep themselves safe, So it was a very educational experience, and on paxnews.com, we posted pictures and write-ups from all the different hotels we went to, and everyone is really doing a good job. They're doing what they can, and they're doing what needs to be done. So I think it was good for us to see that with our own 2 eyes, as opposed to just reading about it. And we have the pictures and the videos to show. So.
Michael, can the consumer go directly to your website to read those reviews?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, paxnews.com is on the internet. It's available to everybody. It is geared toward the travel trade, but anyone can access it. There are certainly articles out there that consumers would be interested in just as much as travel agents. Absolutely.
I know this is a pie in the sky kind of question, but from what you're reading, what your conversations with suppliers and customers and so on, how do you see the future of travel with COVID for the near future anyhow?
Yeah, I love these crystal ball questions. It really is a prediction. Well, of course, I think first and foremost, the future of travel depends on how the vaccine rolls out over the next 6 to 12 months, how it rolls out in Canada, and how the government and how travel restrictions will play into that. The government has a lot of control over the travel industry right now, whether we like it or not. The grounded flights to Mexico and the Caribbean obviously is a huge barrier right now. And obviously the mandatory hotel quarantine, pre-departure testing. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of barriers for the average traveler right now at play. So I think travel will always be on people's horizon. It seems like every 2 weeks we get a new survey study or research that says how big the pent-up demand is, how there is a pent-up demand, that people are going to travel the moment those restrictions are lifted. And there's also something to be said about the role that loyalty programs will play. There was the most recent study I read was last week about people who use loyalty programs are already planning on using their points for travel or would like to use them for travel when they can travel, which really just illustrates that people really want to get up and go when it's safe to do so or when they feel safe to do so. But of course, what I think is going to happen is the moment those restrictions are lifted and when people start getting vaccinated and feel safer to travel, they will go on those trips and make it worth their while. There's a lot to be said about people will probably splurge on more trips. They'll take longer trips. They might spend that extra money on upgrades. As much as the COVID-19 pandemic has been, devastating financially for so many people. There's a lot of people out there who still have their vacation budget from last year and they didn't use it. And they're going to put it towards that next trip. And they might have some extra money to throw on top of that. So I think upgraded trips are going to be really, really big when those are possible. Of course, the value of using a travel advisor is definitely something to point out. Anyone who used a travel advisor when all those cancellations happened last year were in good hands, and the people who didn't use one were probably kicking themselves. So the pandemic has obviously shown the value of using a travel advisor in booking travel. So I think we'll definitely see more people considering that, especially people who didn't use a travel advisor before. Which is great news for the trade industry. I don't know if you've heard this term revenge travel.
No.
It sounds sinister. It sounds dangerous, but it's not. Really, revenge is best served on a flight. This is a buzzword that's been floating around throughout media for the past several months now. And really, it's just that people are going to go on extra trips and splurge because they've been deprived of doing so for so long. They're going to take revenge on the pandemic. So I think that is something that we'll see. Obviously, domestic offerings, just like we saw last summer, there's definitely some potential for that business to blow up this summer. I know there's a lot of suppliers out there that are really pushing their domestic product and amping up their promotions right now to get that part of the market. As for the travel industry, where I first see that going, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of changes I see coming up. Obviously, in the cruising world, we're already seeing proof of COVID vaccination as a mandatory requirement to go on these trips. Proof of vaccination will likely be mandatory for a lot of companies coming up. I know Crystal Cruises last week announced it. A few other cruise lines have already announced it. I think they all will. Eventually, that's just a prediction. That's not a fact, but I think they will. All the cruise companies will have to consider that as they restart. You're already seeing it with the tour operators. A couple of weeks ago, Globus announced that it'll require proof of vaccination for all of its tours and river cruises and its vacation packages. So I think that's something you'll definitely see in the next 6 to 12 months. Digital passports is another thing. The IATA Travel Pass has been talked a lot about in media. This is just an app that displays local COVID requirements, but it also shows your vaccination logs and registries. And it's really meant to sort of provide a seamless experience for the travels through a digital format. This is already being sort of picked up by a few airlines out there. I know Etihad, Copa Airlines, they're going to start trialing it next month. Air New Zealand. So we're going to see a lot of that, those digital health cards. That could potentially change how travel works over the next 6 to 12 months. And the other thing is, for travel agents, I foresee more revenue sources. And what I mean by that is there's a company in the UK out there that's actually paying travel agents commission for selling PCR tests. It's based in the UK, and they're called Chronomics. And this is a company that recognizes that PCR testing has become just as important to the itinerary as it would be travel insurance.
Yeah.
So they recognize the trade as a valuable partner, and they're already kind of partnering up with people in Canada to basically allow travel agents the ability to sell PCR tests to their clients and make some commission from it. So I think that's what we're going to see. And I also think that I hope to see some improved relationships between the travel agents and suppliers. I think the pandemic really exposed a few flaws in the system. And I know that there's a lot of suppliers out there that are working hard to protect travel agent commissions and pay commissions faster. There's a lot of activity happening in that space. And I know ACTA, for one, is really making that one of their priorities, in addition to many, many other things they're lobbying for the year ahead. So that's sort of how I foresee things kind of unfolding over the next 6 to 12 months. So
the next crystal ball question is about Canadian Airlines, and I know negotiations are taking place between government and the airlines and organizations. But at the end of the day, I mean, even when it's declared okay to begin traveling again, I mean, there's just no way of Air Canada, WestJet, all the other airlines that service Canada to all of a sudden just take all of these planes and just lift them in the sky and get back to what it was pre-pandemic. So how do what kind of conversation do you hear with regard to the airlines and whether or not they will, how quickly they will get their programs back into place to get back up to speed on all of the kind of services that they used to cover?
Wow. Well, how much time do you have? Yeah, there's a lot in that question. From the outset, Canada's aviation sector is a sector in crisis right now. There's no way around. There's no denying that. The first thing that has to happen, obviously, is this federal bailout or federal assistance package that Ottawa is reportedly putting together for the aviation sector. That has to happen before anything else can happen. Ottawa has made it clear that if the airlines want any federal assistance, they have to refund customers, and that's understandable. But they've got to work that out first. What's most important, at least what I care about when it comes to our readers, is making sure that whatever aviation sectoral support is made available, there has to be some sort of stipulation that travel agent commissions are protected. It's been widely publicized how much income and commission is going to be recalled if there are no protections in place. I really hope that the government is listening when they hear stories of travel agents that have had to pay back tens of thousands of dollars, possibly even more, in their income because of a recall. Of course, I'm not sure if you've heard or not, but there's the Association of Canadian Independent Travel Advisors, ACITA, wonderful group of women, a grassroots group that they formed last year, who've been doing incredible work to bring those issues to light and to get the issues of travel agents into the minds and agendas of politicians. They've done tremendous work, and they're seeing a lot of progress in their fight. So I really hope that works out. Obviously, sorry, do you have to add? Yeah.
I was involved with actually getting all of the Newfoundland MPs.
Oh, okay.
Have meetings with. So, and actually, the last MP to have that meeting will be next week, and that's Minister Seamus O'Regan, who you probably know already. And so his meeting is next week, and I've been working with the ladies, and we've got so we'll have all Newfoundland MPs understand
Absolutely.
that part of the industry as well.
Yeah.
I want people to understand it's important when it comes to servicing our clients to be able to have that kind of working relationship with the MP. So
Absolutely. It's super important. And I think, just in terms of aviation, the airlines are obviously waiting for restrictions to loosen. That's the other half of this. And there's the aviation industry, network reductions, cutting routes, cutting out off the east, many routes. I know you guys out there have suffered a lot of different route cutbacks. This has led to thousands of layoffs, and the airlines are bleeding through millions and millions of dollars a day. So the Canadian government, my personal opinion, needs to step up. I know there's governments around the world that have supported their airlines, and they see airlines as a economic lifeline to the economy. So I really hope we see some progress in that regard, with travel agents in mind, of course. And to your point, aviation, it's not something that you can just flip a light switch and restart it. A lot has to happen when you start amping up air routes. You have to retrain the pilots. You have to retrain safety. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. And then of course there's the state of our airlines as well. I mean, the Air Canada Transat deal has been this ongoing saga that we've been watching for some time now. Obviously there's questions to be raised about competition, price increases. The Canadian government has given a green light on this transaction. The EU, the European Commission, is still studying the deal, and the deadline has passed. So from what I gather, both parties are in a position to walk away. So there might be a new potential buyer that might come on board. We don't know. We're sort of watching this closely to see what happens. So it's a very interesting time. But I think if you look at the different transactions and the activity that's happening with airlines right now, you can kind of see what they're predicting too. Like, for example, Sunwing's hotel division, Blue Diamond Resorts, recently signed that partnership with Marriott. That's an example of these companies really expecting for there to be a big boom in sand and sun travel. I know when the time is right, like, I can't wait to get back to the beach. I can't wait to get back to the sun. And these alliances that you're seeing is proof that companies are really predicting this boom to happen. So there's establishing alliances where alliances make sense.
yeah.
I think aviation is also a global issue too. I think there needs to be global safety standards, some sort of global vaccination policy. The cruise industry has done a tremendous job at creating some sort of consistent set of standards for a restart. The aviation industry isn't quite there yet. So I would like to see some consistency between the airlines and the countries. It's obviously a very complicated beast to manage, but hopefully we'll get there. And finally, I think there's also something to be said, and I was thinking about this the other day, the role of ultra low-cost carriers in Canada. I recognize that not all low-cost carriers have particularly paid commissions to travel agents, but this is an industry in Canada that has really grown significantly over the past several years, and you're seeing a much aggressive investment in the low-cost carrier space. And I know just recently, as an example, Flair, they plan to serve 18 different Canadian cities by the end of August, including, I believe, St. John's, Newfoundland was on there as well. Obviously, some of these routes have been suspended by some of the other the bigger carriers, but I'd be very curious to see what role the low-cost carriers will have in the recovery, especially as some of these companies in Canada are tapping talent from Europe, where low-cost carriers are used frequently. Not saying they're not used in Canada, but there's definitely a shift in terms of bringing those low-cost carriers into the ring as a competitor. And I'd be very curious to see what role they play in the recovery over the next 6 to 12 months.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. It's been
Welcome.
excellent having you on the show, and some great information. I know it's a mixture between consumer and the trade information, but hopefully consumers who are watching and the clients who are watching can understand that everything that makes this industry tick, and the challenges that the industry has had over the year, this past year, and will probably face for another 12 to 18 months, even, type of thing. So until it really gets back to where we consider to be normal. So again, thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Derek, and good luck to you and all the travel agents out there that are navigating through this storm. We will get there. I can feel that we're almost there. It just seems complicated right now, but I know we will get back to a point where it may not feel normal, but at least it'll get us back to doing what we love.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for participating. Next week, our guest will be all about Scotland and all about playing golf in Scotland. So I hope you can join us again next week, same time, Thursday at 3 p.m. Newfoundland time and 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks very much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.